ansiedad y la impaciencia se refugien, donde la ansiedad y la impaciencia se refugien, aliviando mis pesares va la hoja de papel, convirtiéndose en aliada de los asuntos del ayer. Ligerita quiero ser, ligerita quiero ser, así de blanca como una hoja de papel, así de blanca como una hoja de papel. Oh, 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 oh. Una hoja en blanco es lo que yo te pido, donde la soledad y el corazón se junten, donde la soledad y la conciencia se dibuje, donde la soledad y la conciencia se dibuje, aliviando mis pesares va la hoja de papel, convirtiéndose en aliada de los asuntos del ayer. Ligerita quiero ser, ligerita quiero ser, así de blanca como una hoja de papel, así de blanca como una hoja de papel, y que escriba sobre mí la vida, que mi cuerpo marque su alegría, su placer, blanca de ser, blanca de ser, pa' que escriba en mí la vida, pa' que escriba en mí la vida, pa' que escriba en mí la vida. Oh, 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 una hoja en blanco es lo que necesito, donde la ansiedad y la apatía se oculten, donde la ansiedad y la impaciencia se refugien, donde la ansiedad y la impaciencia se refugien. Aliviando mis pesares va la hoja de papel, convirtiéndose en aliada de los asuntos del ayer. Ligerita quiero ser, ligerita quiero ser, así de blanca como una hoja de papel, así de blanca como una hoja de papel. Oh, 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 una hoja en blanco es lo que yo te pido, donde la soledad y el corazón se junten, donde la soledad y la conciencia se dibuje, donde la soledad y la conciencia se dibujen. Aliviando mis pesares va la hoja de papel, convirtiéndose en aliada de los asuntos del ayer. Ligerita quiero ser, ligerita quiero ser, así de blanca como una hoja de papel, así de blanca como una hoja de papel, y que escriba sobre mí la vida.
Hola, me llamo Noemí, soy intérprete y estoy aquí con mi cointérprete Anabel.
Hi, my name is Annabelle, and I'm an interpreter, and I'm here with my co-interpreter, Noemi.
La justicia lingüística incluye el compromiso de asegurarnos de que se puedan escuchar todas las voces. Quisiera comenzar reconociendo todos los idiomas presentes hoy aquí, entre estos el lenguaje de señas estadounidense.
Language justice includes a commitment to making sure all voices can be heard. I want to begin by acknowledging all the languages represented here today, including American Sign Language.
Hoy este evento también se llevará a cabo en español e inglés y le explicaré cómo puede elegir un canal para participar en su idioma preferido.
Today's event will be in Spanish and English, and I will explain how you can choose a channel to participate in your preferred language.
Estaremos usando la función de interpretación de Zoom. Si usa una computadora, verá un globo terráqueo en la parte inferior de la pantalla. Tome nota, aún no activamos la interpretación. Les avisaré cuando buscar el globito. Si usa una tableta o teléfono, pulse en Más o More o busque 3 puntitos y verá un menú que incluye la opción de interpretación de idiomas. Para escuchar la interpretación, pulse el icono del globo terráqueo o Interpretación de idiomas. A continuación, elija su canal de idioma. Si está en un teléfono inteligente o tableta, haga clic en Listo o Done.
We'll be using the Zoom interpreting function. If you're using a computer, you will see a globe icon at the bottom of your screen. Note, we haven't activated interpretation yet, but I'll let you know when you can look for the icon. If you're on a tablet or a smartphone, click on More or the 3 little dots and you will see a menu that includes an option called Language Interpretation. To listen to the interpreting, click the globe icon or Language Interpretation. Then choose your language channel. If you are using a phone or a tablet, click Done.
Todas las personas deben estar en un canal de idioma. Aún si entiende todos los idiomas hablados, escoja un idioma para escuchar la conferencia.
Everyone should be on a language channel, even those who speak English. Even if you understand every language here, choose a language to listen to.
Host, please activate Annabelle as an interpreter right now. Anfitrione, por favor, active a Annabelle como intérprete. Y la audiencia, por favor, cuando vea aparecer el globito que ya ha aparecido, por favor, elija su canal de idioma. Please choose your language channel now. Ahora vamos a comenzar la interpretación simultánea y haremos una prueba de la función de interpretación. Ahora estoy hablando en español y la interpretación se escucha en el canal de inglés. Por favor, levante el pulgar o escriba en el chat, escucho, si puede escuchar a la interpretación en el canal de inglés. Now I'm speaking in English. The interpreting can be heard on the Spanish channel. Please give me a thumbs up if you can hear the interpreting on the Spanish channel or write it in the chat. Quisiera compartir unos recordatorios. Por favor, silencie su micrófono cuando no esté hablando. Por favor, hable un solo idioma a la vez. Y hable a un ritmo moderado y tome pausas con frecuencia. Si lo olvida, no se preocupe, le recordaremos con este movimiento en la pantalla. Esto hará que su mensaje sea más accesible para todos. Si no puede escuchar la interpretación, no sufra en silencio. Use la caja del chat para pedir ayuda. Gracias y disfruten el evento. Host, please activate me as an interpreter now. Anfitrione, por favor, actíveme como intérprete. And turning it over to you.
Everyone. I can't believe that is the last time I'm going to say this for our event. Again, my name is Virginia Duplessis, and I am your MC for this event. Oh my gosh, what a week. Amazing speakers, performers. I've had a chance to connect with some participants. And everyone is really inspired and challenged to think about how we can do a better job of promoting the safety of survivors and also working to prevent violence from happening in the first place. I want to get us going on our final event. My heart is beating out of its chest. Whew. I'm so honored to introduce our final event, where we are featuring world-renowned leader and advocate for sexual assault survivors, Tarana Burke, and beloved journalist, survivor, and activist, Maria Hinojosa. I know that this conversation about action, hope, and healing is the perfect ending to this 4 days that we've all had together. So, by way of introduction, as the founder and activist behind the Me Too movement, Tarana Burke needs no introduction. For 3 decades, Tarana has worked to increase support for survivors of sexual violence, in particular, Black and Brown girls and women. She has championed empowerment through empathy and healing in the many campaigns and programs she has led and launched throughout her career, including as the founder and executive director of MeTooMovement.org. Tarana's memoir, which I can't wait to read, Unbound, My Story of Liberation and the Birth of the Me Too Movement, will be released this fall. She is joined by Maria Hinojosa, who in her over 30-year career has reported for PBS, CBS, WNBC, CNN, NPR, and WGBH, just to name a few. In 2010, she created Futuro Media, an independent nonprofit with the mission to create multimedia content to empower people to navigate the complexities of an increasingly diverse and connected world. In our house, we listen to Latino USA every Sunday while we make dinner and definitely learn something new every week. In her memoir, Once I Was You, which was published last year, Maria shares her own story about growing up Mexican American in Chicago and her career reporting stories about communities and people who are so often overlooked. With that, I welcome Tarana Burke and Maria Hinojosa.
And this is where we would have all the applause, like, hey, Tarana.
Hello.
And we'd be on stage and we'd be like,
Oh,
sister.
so nice. Exactly. Hugs. You remember those old things? Hugs.
Well, I'm starting to hug people now because I'm fully vaccinated. And if I see people in my park here in
nice.
Harlem outside and I'm like, I'm fully vaccinated, and they say I'm fully vaccinated, I'm like, well, bring it
Let's
in.
hug.
So I'm actually feeling some.
Wait, where are you in Harlem? I didn't know you were in New York.
114th Street, right here next to Morningside
116th
Park.
Street, between Fifth and Lenox.
Are we neighbors?
We're neighbors.
Okay, so we're gonna have to work out in the park together.
Oh, I don't know. We might have to meet for a drink together.
You know, Tarana, I actually wanted to say before anything, I'm so thrilled to be asked to have this conversation with you at the end of this extraordinary conference. But I got all kind of gooey inside and I was just like, I have to say thank you to you, Tarana, because if it weren't for you and what you did in terms of the Me Too movement, and then just the continuing escalation of the Me Too movement, you know, I don't know if I would have been so public about being a survivor. And so I just really want to say thank you, because this is how we do it, right? Is we're learning from each other and we're feeling the love and support from each other. So just like from 114th Street to 116th.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
So I want to start by just asking you how you do it, because I think we can't just kind of jump into just like everything is not, because it's not normal. So how are you? I'm feeling a little bit overwhelmed right now. I'm not sure. Yeah. Maybe it's the end of the week. Maybe it's the end of April. But how are you? How are you doing?
This was a really kind of busy week. I released a book I co-edited with Brene Brown this week, and
that's right. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. And it's so surreal because, you know, I've always wanted to be an author. I was so excited it's my first book. And I can't be out in the world to see it, you know, so it feels a little bittersweet, but I'm still tired. You know, there's been lots of interviews and conversations and things like that. So it's been a long week, and I'm actually also still editing my memoir. So kind of doing double duty. So I do feel, I don't know. My friend asked me the other day, how are you feeling? And I said, is unfeeling a way to feel? So I just feel like I'm coasting a little bit.
One of our, I can't remember the name of his podcast, but it's something fabulous. Like millennials are going to tear down capitalism. I know, he's great, a Black guy. And he was just like, it's a constant state of just okayness. And I'm like, I feel it, you know, and the constant battle. But then, you know, we're lucky we live in Harlem. I mean, it's not often now that I'm walking in the neighborhood, but of course, walking by the Harriet Tubman statue or walking by the Frederick Douglass statue. These are the things that, you know, help us to understand there's a historical reason why we're here.
Yeah. And New York is starting to feel alive again. You know, it was real. I mean, you know, at the height of the pandemic, I didn't even want to come outside. It felt so scary to be outside. And my husband the partner at the time got COVID really early on, and it was a very scary time. So to see the city start to come alive, to hear as the weather changes, the sounds of the summer coming in the spring, it's nice. It makes you feel a little bit more connected.
So the ending thoughts of the conference were written out by action, hope, and healing. And as I was pondering this, Tarana, I was like, action, hope, and healing. And then I looked at it. I'm a very visual person, and I was actually wrote it down on a Post-it. Okay. And I was like, actually, I feel like I want to talk about this in reverse as we just wrap up. So to me, it had to start with my own healing in terms of violence and sexual violence. It had to be seeing it, healing myself in order to understand the hope. And then that allowed me to take action, to talk, to create a space where certainly, you know, in the Latina community, talking about rape and surviving rape is not necessarily the thing that is always out there. Yeah. So action to leading conversation, but think about that, healing to hope to action. So you want to take just a minute to talk about the healing that is going to lead us to hope that then leads us to action?
I think it depends on who you are, because for me, it actually happened in the opposite way. I found activism and movement work, and none of it was about survival, none of it was about sexual violence, but it helped me find hope. It helped me to tap into hope and opened me up to the ideas of healing. And then I was able to, and actually that's why I kind of talk about it both ways, that there's healing and action and healing. Because I experienced it, and I think some other people, it gave me an avenue to having life again. Like movement work breathed life into me, and that having that life move through me opened me up to the possibility of healing. So I do think it depends on how your entry point into this. And I also think that I would love for us to reframe how we think of healing. I think that we have to also think of healing as movement work, right?
Yes.
A lot of people think it's one or the other. I'm going to do this healing so that I can get active in the movement, when the actual steps that you take to heal yourself as an individual should be counted as movement work too. Because ultimately we are a movement that's about ending and interrupting sexual violence, but we should also be about embracing the people who've already experienced sexual violence and their journey to being whole again. All of that should be included in the vision we have for the world without being free of sexual violence. And so when people say, well, I'm going to take a break to work on myself, I'm like, that's not really a break. It's just a different path. But I do think though that you're right. Many people start their journey in that way. They are focused on what they need to do to heal themselves, to start on a journey to healing, to think about healing. And when you do that, once you realize it's possible, it is so hope-filled, right?
It's so hope-filled.
It's so hope-filled. You're like, oh, wait, okay, look at all these things that are possible, right? And I think we meet, and the other thing is that healing so often happens in community, that once you start healing and you're in community with other people, you'll often meet some people who are already steps ahead. So they've gone on to the action work, and they bring people in, and that's sort of the continuum we create of how we create survivor leaders and new people to bring into the movement.
Oh my God. I remember when my therapist, she was my conduit to kind of understand. And when I had to realize that I was a survivor, and I was just like, because as a journalist, we try to not be in categorized, right? Which is ridiculous. But nonetheless, I was like, I'm a survivor. Oh my God. And then just like, yeah, I'm a survivor,
Yeah.
So the feeling of overwhelmedness, which I think we so feel, it was always this contradiction, which is on the one hand, we are talking about this more. This is much more in the conversation, but that means that we're hearing a lot more about sexual violence. Every morning you can see something that is just like, oh my God, I cannot. So it feels like, we're moving forward, and yet we're also moving backwards. And I'm wondering what you're doing, Tarana, as you're processing like steps forward now in this moment, which is different than a year ago when we were in the Trump administration and a presidential campaign that was ugly. So kind of what are you focusing on that's quite specific in terms of, Black survivors, survivors of color, and actually moving forward in steps that are measurable?
So our work hasn't really changed. When Me Too went viral, when hashtag Me Too went viral, it really amplified all the work to end sexual violence across the field. But Me Too movement has been what it has always been. It's always been survivor-led, survivor-focused. It's always centered the most marginalized, starting with Black and Brown folks. And so, when I decided that we were going to become an organization, the very first thing I did was create an HBCU tour, so that because we started in April, and I was like, these Black college campuses don't have anywhere close to the amplification of Sexual Assault Awareness Month as these private white institutions do. So, that's where we started. But we're engaged, very, very concretely in a campaign that just kicked off in partnership with the National Women's Law Center and Time's Up, called We As Ourselves, that was created to focus on Black survivors specifically. Because what we've seen in, the last 3.5 years is that many stories get told. And often, even whether you're Black, white, or everything in between, most people don't care after a while about our stories. But some stories don't even get a chance to be told at all. And so we created We As Ourselves because we had these high profile cases that kept coming up around Black survivors and folks who were accused who were Black males. And the backlash was so swift and furious. And acknowledging and also to be an example, right? This same campaign could be created for Latinx community, for the queer community, for the Asian community, right? We all have a culture of silence in our communities that are very specific and should not be lumped together because they come from different reasons and for different reasons. And so I think of We As Ourselves as a campaign that's very necessary, but also a model for what we should be having, what we should be talking about. Collectively, we are a movement moving in the same direction, but there's so much nuance in the field, and that nuance needs to be addressed because it's all really important.
As you were talking about that, and I'm thinking about, on the one hand, in social media and even in TV, whatever we call TV now, Netflix, etc. This is coming up, right? So I was thinking of The Chai. I'm not sure if you know that storyline in The Chai.
I don't know the storyline, but I know.
So there's actually a storyline where a young Black teenager is trafficked, basically, by a Black man, and we're able to see this is exactly what it looks like. So it was very dramatic and painful, but at the same time, seeing it, Now I May Destroy You, phenomenal. I didn't even know what I was watching. I just found, I forget her name. I'm bad with names after COVID.
Michaela Cole. Yeah.
Michaela Cole. Thank you so much, love. I mean, I was just taken. I didn't even realize what I was in for.
That show. God, I'm
right?
sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, she had such courage, and I'm wondering, Tarana, you're telling your story. I'm telling my story. Some people are like, well, it's all about stories, but what is it about in terms of us owning the capacity to tell these things as in particular women of color?
Yeah, I think it's so what's so incredible about I May Destroy You in particular is that if you watch the series, I think it's like 10 or 12 episodes, you see her flashing back to what happened to her in bits and pieces throughout the show. But the bulk of the show is about what that trauma that she experienced left her with, the state that it left her in, and what she had to do to work through it. And it's so real, it's jarring to see it played out in real time, and to see a Black woman grappling with these things. It's particularly a young Black woman grappling with these things while life is just continuing, right? Which is what the reality of survival looks like. Life continues, and you have to hold these things that have now been dumped on you, essentially. And I think that's the most important part. I have never, people have put there's like Wikipedia pages and websites that think they have my story because they've pieced it together through articles and little bits and bits of facts here and there. But I've never told the story of what happened to me on purpose, because I don't think it is relevant to know the gory details of what happened to me in order for you to empathize with me or any other survivor. I do think it's important for you to understand what my life has been like in the wake of what happened to me, and what it is to be Black and a survivor in this country and carry the weight of what I've been carrying for now 40 years. I do think that's important. I do think it's important for us to really examine the differences of survival while Black, survival while trans, survival. I think those are the stories that we have to hear, and we have to hear them over and over again. Historically, what we've seen is survivors be sort of trotted out to tell these really gory stories of the most horrific things that happened to them, and that be used as the basis to pull empathy or really sympathy from people so that they can pass a law, or create some kind of policy. And that shouldn't be the case. I wrote my story in my book because forever and always I will now be saying, go read the book. Right? When people ask, I'm just not equipped. And there's some people who are, and I'm not, this is not to say there's a right or wrong way to do it. I'm not equipped to tell that story over and over again. I'm just not. I don't want to revisit it. I don't want those details sitting at the front of my mind all the time. So storytelling is very important, but in my experience, what the empathy that we need, the understanding that we need from people in the world, comes from their understanding of the impact of the violence that we've experienced.
Can you talk for a little bit, Tarana, about healing while Black? In particular? I mean, I'm thinking about when I created a television series and I told the team that I wanted to do a story about infant mortality. We ended up doing it in Rochester, New York, which has among the highest rates among Black women and Puerto Rican women of infant mortality. And we started reporting, this was almost 10 years ago, about toxic stress. And people were like, what are you talking about, toxic stress? That's not scientific. That's not this. That. And that was just 10 years ago.
Interesting.
So I'm wondering if you can talk for a moment what it is healing while Black in this country where what healing?
Let me tell you, you just made me want to share a passage. I'm not trying to push my book or anything.
You go, and you can push the book. We wanted to sell, yes.
But when you said toxic stress, so the thing about being, particularly this moment in this country, being a Black woman, is that it's like in other moments, we have so much more celebration, I should say, of Black women than we've seen in the past, right? We have, the Black women have saved the democracy. They showed up and they voted, and they, Stacey Abrams came through for us. And, you hear all of these things, Black girl magic. What I set out to write, this is a book of essays, and I was going to write an essay completely different. I was going to write about white supremacy and I just had a whole other set of ideas. And what came out when I sat at the computer was my personal story about stress and anxiety, and about how stress and anxiety nearly killed me a year ago. A story, and so funny, I did the CBS morning show the other morning. I did the pre-interview with Gayle King, and she said, I read your story. And she said, I don't know how I missed that you had a stroke last year. I Googled it and I couldn't find any articles. And I said, because I didn't tell anybody. It's not a public story. The first time I put it out is in
I'm kind of having a moment right now, Tarana. I'm just like,
I know. And I should not. Well, but here's the thing. I experienced last summer after my husband dealt with COVID that nearly killed him, while trying to hold an organization together, while being in the midst of that horrific presidential election, and during the uprisings, after George Floyd's murder, after Breonna Taylor's murder, I was just at the end of my rope. And I had what's called a TIA, which is like a mild stroke. And that revealed, through a set of neurological testing, it revealed that I had another condition. It's a set of it's complex migraines, essentially. Okay. But my neurologist, who was amazing, this Black woman at Mount Sinai, New York, said to me, if you don't change your life drastically, you will die.
Wow. Just
like that. And so it was on my heart so heavily at the time. I wrote about it, but this part in particular, I said, this essay is written in the form of a letter to myself, to my future self. I said, I don't know how we miss the connection between strength and excellence. Do you get it now? I know you probably still call yourself a freedom fighter, but I wonder if you have mapped out a path to your own liberation. Black excellence, strong Black woman, thank a Black woman, but Black girl magic, they are all about our labor, not our liberation. That's what I think about when I think about healing while Black, because everything we do, our worth is tied up in our work, right? Black women, until we are we are only worthy in as much as we can produce for this country. And when we are not able to produce and we start talking about our pain and our stress and our needs, then all of a sudden there's a wall and people can't hear us anymore. And so it makes it that much more difficult to find spaces to truly heal, to truly get the kind of healing we need. I did an interview once with, I was interviewing Gabrielle Union for Essence, and she said something so profound to me. She said her healing changed once she stopped performing healing for the benefit of the people around her.
Ooh.
Right? I had to stop for a second and like rewind. She said she was on a journey. She did the work, the therapy, the and she realized that she was performing healing for ways that made the people around her comfortable, not in the ways that she needed. And that is so indicative of how women of color in this country, marginalized women in this country, women who bear all this extra stress on top of, that is a reality for us. And so it is super important to me, and I think just sort of a personal mission, that we create honest, safe spaces, not just safe, but honest, and for healing to happen. Because it's not going to happen in 10 steps. It's not going to happen in any linear way. It is not going to look like, it may not look like what is written in a book. It may not look like what it looked like for you last week. And we need space. We don't have space to fall apart, right? We don't get that space. We get a couple of minutes and then you got to pull it back together. Because part of healing is trying to feel worthy again, trying to get back to yourself. But the thing that I have discovered in my own journey and watching other people on their journeys is that when we realize that the self that we're trying to come back to no longer exists, then it frees us up from this burden of trying to prove something, of trying to get something that's just not there. Know that what you're coming back to is brand new and be okay with that. I'm sorry. I feel like I'm gonna start preaching now.
No. See, I'm listening because I'm like, okay, on my next healing moment, because I think that is exactly right. It comes to you and you never know when you're going to just be like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Last night, somebody asked, I did an event last night in Chicago, well, virtually. Yeah. And a white older man asked me, so can you talk about the long standing impact of being raped as a 16-year-old? And I'm just like, okay, all right. And you realize that, okay, I'm going to have to find another way to heal today, which is different than it was yesterday. Yeah. But I was like, keep on preaching, Tarana, yeah. So I just want to say.
But can I say something about that just
absolutely.
Really quickly? This is another perfect example, because I think that's an insensitive question to ask directly without some prior conversation that says I'm okay with it. So your healing might look like in that moment, because I've been asked that on live on the air. Oh my God, I read somewhere that you were raped at 6 years old. That must be horrible. And I had to say, don't do that. I literally had to say that to the man on the air.
Now I know to say, because I really was just like, so thank you. Yeah.
It is, somebody said trifling and raggedy. It is a raggedy question, but what you're healing, and this is my thing, the question we have to ask ourselves in that moment, I'm a Black woman, you're a Latina woman. How are people going to perceive me? You have to start making all these decisions. If I say, no, that's a raggedy question, are they going to say, oh goodness, here she goes with that angry Black woman stuff? And is she going to say, oh, she's just Latina, she's always going, like there's all these stereotypes, and we have to make those split decisions. And what I want for us when it comes to healing is the space to say, I want the freedom to heal. And what my healing looks like is I will not answer that question. This is a boundary for me. That's not okay to ask. So I need you to ask something else.
Damn. Oh my God. I got all teary-eyed, Tarana. Nobody
I'm
makes
sorry.
me
I'm
cry.
not trying to make you
Nobody
cry, but it's
makes
just
me cry.
it's important that you have that for yourself, because that is also a part of your healing. You don't get to ask me those questions. I own my story. Our stories really are gifts, not the tragedy that happened to us, but the survival is a gift. Every day that we get up and we breathe and we survive is a gift. And we're building that story every day as we go along. You don't deserve that if you can't respect the gift that I'm sitting here giving you. So let me say this. Ask me that question again. And if you can't figure out how to ask it the right way, you can't get the gift of my story. Move on. This is how I'm healing today.
Okay.
That's what we're going to start saying. This is how I'm healing today.
Thank you, Mama. I needed that script. I was just so thrown up against the wall by it, but now
I'm sure.
And that's why we love you, Tarana, because you rooted in yourself, in your heart, in your love for yourself and your healing, but you give us tools and vocabulary for the rest of us. And you have helped millions and millions. Look at me. I'm all like, but that's okay. Because I have my false eyelashes on. So you know what I'm saying? Because we got to keep it looking good.
That's right.
Thank you so much for this beautiful conversation, my love. I think
you.
we are now have to meet in the park.
Oh yeah, I think so. We have
something
to meet
like
in the park.
that. I need to give you a hug. Thank you so much for all of you for having Tarana and me in conversation. This was, as you can tell, quite beautiful, quite emotional. And I'm going to send it back now to Virginia.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I feel like a professional journalist. Maria Hinojosa has sent the mic back to me. Honestly, everyone, I don't even know what to say. I'm sure, like many of you, just stunned and in awe of that amazing conversation. And I don't think Maria is the only one who has tears in her eyes. It's the kind of tears that you have when you know that you've been seen and heard. Just very powerful. And an amazing way to finish our conference and letting us own our stories. Okay, I'm going to pull it together, everyone. I've got 2,000 of you here in the virtual room with us, joining on Zoom, joining on YouTube, joining on Facebook. 300 speakers. I learned so much. All the contributions you're really making to help us think critically, again, about how we can support survivors and ultimately prevent violence from happening in the first place. I want to thank our funders, FIPSA, the Blue Shield Foundation of California, the Blue Shield of California Foundation, and Allstate, the Allstate Foundation, and again, our steering committee members. Our concurrent sessions could not have happened with all of our amazing volunteer moderators, many of whom got a 10-minute crash course on how to pin videos and share screens. So thank you again for providing that service so we could all enjoy the conference. As you can probably guess, it basically takes a small city to put on an event of this scale. And we have so many people behind the scenes who helped us pull this off. First of all, I need to thank Chantal, Stephanie, and Shayna at Do Good Events. At Confex, our tech support, special shout outs to Lauren, Judith, and Diane. So this year, we really made a conscious effort to make sure that our diverse field was able to participate in the language they feel most comfortable with. We learned so much in this process, and we have a whole virtual posse of people. First of all, our over 20 Spanish interpreters. Shout out to Andrea, Liliana, Noemi, Annabelle, Roberto, and the whole crew. Everyone at Heart Song, ASL Interpreter Services, thank you so much. And the captioners from Archive Captioners. Finally, I have to say a huge thank you to the team here at Futures Without Violence, especially my girl, Kate Vandertuig, who has been working on this conference for almost 3 years now, as we were originally going to be in Chicago, moved to virtual, and she just managed everything with so much humor, grace, and smarts. The rest of the conference planning team, including Lisa Sohn, who is my conference doula, bringing me lots of snacks, Graciela Olguin, our great intern, Abby Larson, and of course, our fearless leader of the health team, Lisa James. Gosh, I feel so lucky just working with all of these hardworking and talented folks. So last, we're gonna end our event with Vocal Rush. Their song, All Good People, it's really been kind of full circle because we started the conference with All Good People as well. So I'm going to say goodbye and officially sign off as your MC. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care.
Dogs in the yard, howling at the moon. There are sinners like me. Our judgment's coming soon. And I stand at the bottom of this dark and lonely well, singing, please give me answers, so I might escape hell. I watched from my window as they gun down another men, try to say it's not my problem, couldn't happen to my friends, but the truth is they're my brothers and they're my countrymen, and if we lose our better angels, we won't get them back again. Come on and raise your voice above the raging seas. We can't hold our breath forever when our brothers cannot breathe. Come on and raise your voice above the raging seas. We can't hold our breath forever when our sisters cannot breathe. When I lived outside Atlanta, in Durham and Nashville, I spent years in California, in the valleys and the hills, and they say we fix the problem. Yeah, we all live the dream, but when shots ring out in Charleston, tell me who are the ones that bleed? Come on and raise your voice above the raging seas. We can't hold our breath forever when our brothers cannot breathe. Come on and raise your voice above the raging seas. We can't hold our breath forever when our sisters cannot breathe. Oh, 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 our brothers cannot breathe. Oh, 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 our sisters cannot breathe. All good people, won't you come around? Won't you come around? Won't you come around? All good people, won't you come around? Won't you come around? Defend your brothers. All good people, won't you come around? Won't you come around? Won't you come around? All good people, won't you come around? Won't you come around? Hold up each other. All good people, won't you come around? Won't you come around? Won't you come around? All good people, won't you come around? Won't you come around? Defend your brothers. All good people, won't you come around? Won't you come around?